The morning sun cast long shadows through the windows of the Millbrook Public Library as Sarah Chun arranged the returned books on her desk. At 32, she had spent the last 5 years building what most would consider an ordinary life in this small Connecticut town. Her neighbors knew her as the quiet librarian who volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends and grew prize-winning tomatoes in her backyard garden. They had no idea that beneath her cardigan and reading glasses lived someone entirely different. Sarah's hands moved with practiced efficiency as she processed the morning returns, but her eyes constantly scanned the room. Old habits died hard. The way she positioned herself gave her clear sight lines to both entrances. The small mirror she placed on her desk reflected the back corner where teenagers often gathered. These weren't the actions of a paranoid person, but of someone whose training had been burned into her very soul. "Morning, Sarah," called out Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who came in every Tuesday to read the newspapers. "You're here early again." "Good morning, Mrs. Patterson," Sarah replied with a warm smile that had taken her months to perfect. "The new mystery novels you requested came in yesterday. I set them aside for you." As Mrs. Patterson shuffled toward the fiction section, Sarah's mind wandered to a different time, a different life. Lieutenant Sarah Chun, United States Navy SEAL Team 6. The first woman to complete the grueling training program and serve in active combat operations. She had been part of missions that would never appear in history books, had saved lives in ways that would never be acknowledged publicly. But that was before everything changed. Before the mission in Syria that went sideways. Before she lost half her team to an IED that intelligence had missed. Before the nightmares started and the weight of command became too heavy to bear. Before she made the hardest decision of her life and walked away from the only world she had ever known. The morning passed quietly until around 10:30 when Sarah noticed the van. It had been parked across the street for nearly an hour, engine running. Through her peripheral vision, she could see 2 men inside, both wearing baseball caps pulled low. One was speaking into a phone while keeping his eyes on the library entrance. Sarah's pulse quickened, but her expression remained calm as she continued checking in books. Years of training had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now, every instinct was screaming danger. She casually walked to the reference section, positioning herself where she could observe the van while appearing to organize books. The men were too old to be college students, too well-dressed to be homeless, and too focused to be lost tourists. Their body language spoke of military training, but something was off. The way they held their shoulders, the constant checking of their surroundings, the barely concealed tension in their movements. These weren't active military. These were contractors, and not the kind who built schools in peaceful villages. Sarah's training kicked in automatically. She cataloged every detail. The van was a 2018 Ford Transit, dark blue, with tinted windows and no visible license plate from her angle. Both men appeared to be in their 40s, well-built, with the kind of alert posture that came from constant danger. The one on the phone had a small scar running from his left ear to his jawline. The driver kept his hands positioned in a way that suggested a concealed weapon. "Sarah, dear, could you help me reach that book on the top shelf?" Mrs. Patterson's voice cut through her surveillance, forcing her to maintain her cover. "Of course," Sarah replied, walking over with a step stool. As she retrieved the book, she used the elevated position to get a better view of the van. Her blood ran cold when she saw what was in the back seat. Duffel bags arranged in a specific pattern. Equipment cases that looked suspiciously like the ones used to transport explosive devices. She handed Mrs. Patterson the book with hands that showed no tremor, despite the adrenaline now flooding her system. "Is there anything else I can help you find?" "No, dear. You're wonderful as always." Sarah returned to her desk, mind racing through possibilities. This was a small town with no strategic military value, no government facilities, nothing that would warrant a terrorist attack. Unless they weren't here for the town itself. The regional FBI field office was only 12 miles away. The state police training facility was 15 miles in the other direction. Or maybe they were using Millbrook as a staging area for something bigger. She glanced at the old clock above the circulation desk. In 30 minutes, the Tuesday morning story time would begin. 15 children between the ages of 4 and 8, plus their parents or caregivers. The thought of innocent families walking into whatever these men had planned made her stomach clench. Sarah moved to her computer and began typing what appeared to be routine library correspondence. In reality, she was sending a coded message to an emergency contact she hadn't used in 3 years. If her suspicions were correct, she needed backup, and she needed it fast. The van's engine shut off. Both men got out, moving with the casual confidence of people who knew exactly what they were doing. The driver carried a small backpack while his partner had what looked like a toolbox. They walked toward the library's main entrance, talking and laughing like old friends visiting their local library. Sarah's hand instinctively moved toward where she used to keep her sidearm, finding only empty space beneath her sweater. She had one knife, a small tactical blade, disguised as a letter opener in her desk drawer. Against 2 armed professionals, it would have to be enough. The electronic door chime announced their arrival. Both men paused just inside the entrance, eyes scanning the interior with the systematic approach of people conducting reconnaissance. Sarah kept her head down, typing at her computer while using the monitor's reflection to track their movement. "Good morning," she called out cheerfully. "Can I help you find something?" "Just looking around," the scarred man replied. His accent carried traces of Eastern European influence. "Nice place you have here." "Thank you. We're very proud of our community library." Sarah's voice remained steady and welcoming while her mind calculated distances, weapons, and escape routes. "Are you new to the area?" "Just visiting," the driver answered. His English was better, but there was something rehearsed about his responses. "We heard this was a good place to bring children." The comment sent ice through Sarah's veins. They knew about story time. This wasn't random. They had been watching, planning, waiting for the right moment when the library would be full of the most vulnerable targets possible. The men separated, moving through the library with practiced efficiency. One headed toward the children's section, while the other browsed the reference area near the back exit. They were positioning themselves to control both entrances while maintaining visual contact with each other. Sarah continued typing, her message now urgent. She had maybe 10 minutes before the family started arriving. 10 minutes to figure out how to neutralize 2 trained operatives without getting innocent people killed. The old Sarah, Lieutenant Shun, would have had a dozen options. This Sarah, Librarian Sarah, had to work with what she had. She opened her desk drawer and palmed the letter opener, sliding it up her sleeve in one smooth motion. Years of muscle memory serve her well. The weight felt familiar in her hand, even if it wasn't the tactical knife she was used to. "Excuse me," the scarred man approached her desk. "Do you have any books about local history? We're particularly interested in government buildings in the area." "Of course," Sarah smiled, standing up. "Our local history section is right over here." As she led him away from her desk, she noticed his partner had moved to the children's area and was examining the reading circle where story time took place. He knelt down and appeared to be looking under the small chairs and tables. Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized what he was doing. He was identifying the best placement for explosive devices to maximize casualties among small children. "Here we are," she said, indicating the local history shelf. "These books have information about all the area facilities, including government buildings." The man reached for a book, and as he did, his jacket opened slightly. Sarah caught a glimpse of a shoulder holster and what looked like the handle of a combat knife. Professional-grade equipment. These weren't amateur terrorists or local criminals. These were experienced operators with specific training and high-quality weapons. "Very helpful," he said, but his attention wasn't on the books. His eyes were focused on the front windows, watching for something or someone specific. Sarah realized with growing alarm that they were waiting for a signal. This wasn't just a 2-man operation. There were others either already in position or on their way. The attack on the library was part of something bigger. A car pulled into the parking lot. Sarah's heart sank as she recognized Mrs. Williams' blue sedan. Tuesday morning story time was about to begin, and with it, the arrival of the most innocent victims imaginable. "Never forget who I am," she muttered under her breath, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She had walked away from the uniform, but she had never walked away from her duty to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The scarred man turned at her words, eyebrows raised. Sorry, did you say something? Just thinking out loud, Sarah replied with an apologetic smile. Occupational hazard of working alone most of the time. But inside, Lieutenant Sarah Chun was awakening from 5 years of carefully maintained sleep. The children's laughter from the parking lot reached her ears, and she felt something she hadn't experienced since leaving the teams. Absolute clarity of purpose. Whatever these men had planned, whatever larger operation they were part of, it stopped here. Today, she might be outnumbered and outgunned, but she had advantages they couldn't possibly know about. They saw a small-town librarian. They had no idea they were about to face one of the most highly trained combat operatives in the world. The door chime sounded again as Mrs. Williams entered with her 4-year-old grandson Tommy. Other families would follow within minutes. Sarah had to act fast. I'll be right back, she told the scarred man. I need to set up for our children's program. As she walked toward the children's section, Sarah Chun, librarian, began to fade away. In her place, Lieutenant Chun, Navy SEAL, started planning the tactical operation that would save everyone in that building, no matter what the cost to herself. Sarah moved through the children's section with deliberate calm, her trained eyes cataloging every detail while maintaining the appearance of a librarian preparing for story time. The second operative, the driver from the van, was crouched near the reading circle, his hands moving beneath one of the small wooden chairs. The metallic click she heard confirmed her worst fears. He was attaching an explosive device. Oh my, she said brightly, approaching him with a children's book in her hands. Are you looking for something? One of the children must have dropped a toy under there yesterday. The man straightened quickly, his hand moving instinctively toward his jacket. No, just dropped my pen. Found it, though. His smile was practiced, but didn't reach his eyes. Up close, Sarah could see the calluses on his hands, the kind that came from extensive weapons training and rappelling. The small scar on his knuckles looked like a knife wound that hadn't healed properly. Well, I need to set up for story time, Sarah said, her voice maintaining the cheerful tone while her mind raced through tactical options. The children will be here any minute. Would you like to stay and listen? We're reading about brave knights today. Something flickered in the man's eyes at her choice of story. No, we need to be leaving soon. He glanced toward his partner, who was still examining books near the reference section. The signal was subtle, but Sarah caught it. A slight nod that meant they were almost ready to proceed. Sarah began arranging the small chairs in a circle, her movements casual but purposeful. As she bent down to adjust one chair, she felt for the device the man had planted. Her fingers found a small rectangular object attached to the chair's underside with strong adhesive. The surface was smooth plastic with what felt like a digital timer. Professional grade, not homemade. The front door chimed again. This time it was the Hernandez family with their twins, Maria and Carlos, both 6 years old. They were followed immediately by 3 more families. Children's voices filled the library, bright and innocent, completely unaware of the danger surrounding them. Mama, can we sit in the front row? Little Maria asked, tugging on her mother's hand. Of course, Mija, Mrs. Hernandez replied, guiding her children toward the reading circle. Sarah's blood turned to ice. There were now 8 children within 15 feet of an active explosive device. She had to get them away from the children's section without causing panic or alerting the operatives to her awareness of their plan. You know what, children, she announced with theatrical enthusiasm. Today we're going to do something special. We're going to have our story time in the main reading area where everyone has more room to spread out. But we always sit in the circle, protested Tommy Williams, Mrs. Williams' grandson. I know, sweetie, but today's story is about a magical quest, and we need more space for everyone to act out the adventure. Sarah began gathering the children, gently guiding them away from the planted device. Parents, could you help me move some of the larger chairs? We want everyone to be comfortable. As families began relocating to the main area, Sarah caught the scarred man's attention. He was watching her with increased interest, his head tilted slightly as if trying to understand why she was changing the established routine. His hand moved closer to his jacket. Sarah needed a distraction, and she needed it now. As she passed the reference desk, she deliberately knocked over a large stack of books, creating a loud crash that made everyone turn to look. Oh my goodness, How clumsy of me, she laughed, kneeling to collect the scattered books. The noise and movement gave her the cover she needed to check her computer. Her emergency message had been received. Help was coming, but the response time would be at least 12 minutes. She had to buy time and protect the civilians. "Let me help you with that," offered Mr. Peterson, one of the fathers. "Thank you so much," Sarah replied, but as Mr. Peterson bent down, she noticed the scarred operative moving purposefully toward them. His patience was wearing thin, and he was becoming suspicious of the delays. "Excuse me," the scar man said, his accent thicker now. "My friend, and I need to use your restroom before we leave." Sarah's pulse quickened. The library's restroom was located down a short hallway that provided access to the building's mechanical systems. If they were planting additional devices, that would be the logical location to disable emergency systems or create secondary explosions. "Of course," she smiled. "It's just down that hallway, last door on the right." As both men moved toward the restroom, Sarah made her decision. She couldn't wait for backup. The device in the children's section had a timer, which meant the attack was scheduled for a specific time, probably coordinated with whatever larger operation they were part of. She had maybe minutes to act. "Mrs. Williams," she said quietly, approaching the elderly woman, "could you take charge of story time for just a few minutes? I need to check on something in my office." "Of course, dear. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine. Just some paperwork that can't wait." Sarah squeezed the woman's shoulder gently. Mrs. Williams had been a teacher for 40 years. If anyone could keep the children calm and in one place, it was her. Sarah slipped away from the group, moving silently toward the hallway where the two operatives had gone. Years of stealth training served her well as she approached the restroom area. The door was closed, but she could hear low voices speaking in what sounded like Russian or Ukrainian. She positioned herself against the wall next to the door, the letter opener now firmly gripped in her right hand. Through the thin door, she could make out fragments of conversation. They were coordinating timing with someone else, mentioning the federal building and simultaneous detonation. Sarah's stomach dropped. This wasn't just about the library. The attack here was designed to draw first responders away from their real target. Emergency services would rush to a library full of injured children while the operatives hit the FBI field office with reduced security. The door handle turned. Sarah pressed herself against the wall, controlling her breathing the way she had been taught during countless high-risk missions. The first man emerged, the driver, still focused on his phone conversation. Sarah moved like lightning. Her left hand clamped over his mouth while the letter opener found the pressure point on his neck that would render him unconscious without permanent damage. He dropped silently, his phone clattering to the floor. The scar man inside called out in Russian, probably asking why his partner had stopped talking. When there was no answer, Sarah heard him moving toward the door. She grabbed the unconscious man's weapon from his shoulder holster, a Glock 19 with a full magazine. The familiar weight felt like coming home after a long journey. Lieutenant Chun was fully awake now. The scarred operative emerged from the restroom with his own weapon drawn, scanning for threats. He wasn't expecting to find a small-town librarian holding a pistol in a perfect Weaver stance, her eyes cold and focused. "Drop your weapon," Sarah commanded, her voice completely different now. Gone was the cheerful librarian. This was the voice that had led combat operations in some of the world's most dangerous places. The man's eyes widened in shock, but he was too well-trained to freeze. He started to bring his weapon around, counting on surprise and superior positioning. He never got the chance. Sarah's first shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his weapon skittering across the floor. Her second shot, aimed with surgical precision, hit his thigh and dropped him to his knees. "I said drop it," she repeated, moving forward to kick his weapon away while keeping her pistol trained on him. The gunshots had been muffled by the hallway's location, but Sarah knew she had seconds before someone came to investigate. She zip-tied both men with electrical ties from the maintenance closet, then checked their phones for additional intelligence. What she found made her blood run cold. Text messages in broken English coordinating with at least 4 other teams. The FBI field office was indeed the primary target, scheduled for 11:15, just after the library explosion would have drawn away emergency responders. But there were also references to the school and the courthouse. This was a coordinated attack on multiple soft targets designed to cause maximum psychological impact. The library was just the beginning. Sarah's mind raced through options. The local police would take too long to coordinate a response to multiple targets. The FBI field office might not even realize they were about to be hit. She had to make choices that would save the most lives. She quickly searched both operatives, finding additional ammunition, a detailed layout of the FBI building, and a small radio tuned to an encrypted frequency. The chatter she heard confirmed her fears. The other teams were in position and waiting for the library explosion as their go signal. Sarah, Mrs. Williams' voice called from the main area. Is everything okay back there? The children are asking about story time. Everything's fine, Sarah called back, her mind working furiously. Just give me 2 more minutes. She had to disarm the device in the children's section, but she also had to warn the other targets. The radio frequency meant she could potentially disrupt their communications, but that would alert them that their plan had been compromised. Sarah made her decision based on years of experience, making impossible choices under pressure. She would disarm the device, evacuate the library, and then use the operatives' equipment to track down the other teams before they could strike. But as she started back toward the children's section, she heard something that made her blood freeze. The distinctive electronic beeping of a timer that had been activated. The device was counting down, and she had less than 3 minutes to get everyone out of the building before it exploded. 3 minutes to save 15 children and their families while maintaining the element of surprise she needed to stop the larger attack. Lieutenant Sarah Chun had faced impossible odds before, but never with so many innocent lives hanging in the balance. As she rounded the corner and saw the children sitting peacefully while Mrs. Williams read them a story about brave knights, she realized this would be the most important mission of her life. The timer beeped again, counting down to disaster, while Sarah Chun prepared to prove that sometimes the most ordinary-looking heroes are the most dangerous of all. Sarah moved swiftly but silently back toward the main library area, her mind calculating seconds with lethal precision. 2 minutes and 40 seconds until detonation. 15 children, 12 adults, 1 elderly librarian volunteer, and herself. 29 people who needed to be evacuated without causing panic that would slow them down or alert the remaining terrorist cells. She approached Mrs. Williams, who was reading about a brave knight facing a terrible dragon. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah as she gently placed her hand on the older woman's shoulder. Mrs. Williams, she whispered, I need you to listen very carefully. In about 30 seconds, I'm going to announce a special fire drill. When I do, I need you to help guide the children toward the back exit. Walk quickly, but don't run. Can you do that for me? Mrs. Williams looked up, and something in Sarah's expression made her nod immediately. 40 years of teaching had given her the ability to recognize real authority when she saw it. Sarah stepped back and clapped her hands together with cheerful enthusiasm. All right, everyone, we're going to play a special game called Quick Night Escape. Just like the brave knights in our story, we need to move quickly and quietly to the back door. Parents, please help gather any bags or jackets. But remember, brave knights travel light. The families began moving, but not quickly enough. Sarah could see some parents starting to question the sudden change, looking around for signs of danger. She needed to control the pace without revealing the urgency. Tommy, she called to Mrs. Williams' grandson, you're our lead knight today. Can you show everyone how brave knights walk quickly to escape the dragon's castle? 6-year-old Tommy puffed out his chest proudly and began marching toward the back exit with exaggerated quick steps. The other children giggled and followed, turning evacuation into a game. 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Sarah positioned herself near the children's section, ostensibly helping parents gather belongings while actually moving closer to the explosive device. She needed to see the timer to know exactly how much time she had left. Sarah, what's really going on? Mr. Peterson approached her, his voice low. He was a veteran himself, and something in her demeanor had triggered his own instincts. Trust me and get your family out, she replied quietly. I'll explain everything once everyone is safe. Mr. Peterson studied her face for 3 seconds, then nodded sharply and moved to hustle his wife and daughter toward the exit. 1 minute and 50 seconds. Sarah knelt beside the chair where the device was attached, pretending to collect scattered crayons while actually examining the timer. What she saw made her stomach drop. This wasn't just a timer. It was connected to a motion sensor. If the device was moved or tampered with, it would detonate immediately. The terrorists had planned for someone discovering the bomb. They wanted to ensure that even if their attack was detected, anyone trying to disarm it would be killed, along with everyone nearby. 1 minute and 30 seconds. The last family was approaching the back exit when Sarah heard the front door chime. Her blood turned to ice as she saw 2 new men entering the library. They looked around, immediately noticing the evacuation in progress and the absence of their colleagues. Backup operatives. The terror cell had planned for contingencies. The new arrivals split up immediately, one moving to block the back exit while the other headed towards Sarah. Both were armed, and both had the cold, professional demeanor of men who killed for a living. "Where is Ivan?" the taller one demanded, his English heavily accented. He pulled a pistol from under his jacket, no longer concerned with maintaining cover. "I don't know anyone named Ivan," Sarah replied, stepping protectively in front of the children's section. The last few families were still 20 feet from the exit. 1 minute and 15 seconds. "You lie," the man snarled, raising his weapon. "Where are my men?" Sarah realized she was out of options. The children were still too close to the device. The new operatives were armed and dangerous, and the timer was counting down to mass murder. There was only one choice left. "Never forget who I am," she muttered. And this time, she let Lieutenant Chun take complete control. Sarah rolled behind the reference desk as the terrorist opened fire, bullets splintering wood where she had been standing. She came up with the Glock she had taken from the unconscious operative, returning fire with mechanical precision. Her first shot took the gunman in the chest, center mass, exactly as she had been trained. Her second shot hit his partner, who was trying to flank her position while the family screamed and dove for cover. "Everyone out, now!" Sarah shouted, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of combat command. "Move to the back exit. Do not stop." Mrs. Williams, bless her heart, began herding children like a general commanding troops. "Quick knights! The dragon is here. Everyone out of the castle." 55 seconds. Sarah sprinted toward the children's section, knowing she had seconds to make an impossible decision. The device couldn't be moved or disarmed without triggering immediate detonation. The families were almost clear, but not quite far enough away to survive the blast if it went off. She grabbed the heaviest reading table in the section, a solid oak piece that weighed at least 200 pounds, and began dragging it toward the explosive device. If she couldn't disarm the bomb, maybe she could contain the blast enough to protect the evacuees. 40 seconds. The table was almost in position when she heard footsteps behind her. The second operative, wounded but not dead, was stumbling toward her with his weapon raised. Sarah spun, bringing up her pistol, but the man was already firing. She felt the bullet graze her shoulder, spinning her around and slamming her against the bookshelf. 30 seconds. Fighting through the pain, Sarah returned fire. Her shot took the terrorist in the head, ending his threat permanently. But the impact and the time spent dealing with him had cost her precious seconds. 25 seconds. The families were clear of the building now, but Sarah realized with crystal clarity that she couldn't get far enough away in time. The blast radius would catch her even if she sprinted for the exit immediately. But she could still save everyone else. 20 seconds. Sarah positioned the heavy oak table directly over the explosive device and threw herself on top of it, using her body weight to keep the table pressed down. The table wouldn't stop the explosion, but it might direct the blast downward into the building's foundation instead of outward toward the evacuees. 15 seconds. Through the window, she could see Mrs. Williams herding the last of the children to safety in the parking lot. Tommy Williams looked back toward the library, and Sarah found herself smiling as she waved at him. He waved back, still playing the brave knight game. 10 seconds. Sarah closed her eyes and thought about the missions she had completed, the lives she had saved, the difference she had made. She had walked away from the teams because she thought she was done being a warrior. But warriors weren't defined by their uniforms or their official status. Warriors were defined by their willingness to sacrifice everything to protect the innocent. 5 seconds. She thought about her team members who had died in Syria and how they would have been proud to see her here, still fighting, still protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. For seconds, she thought about the other terrorist cells preparing to strike the FBI building, the school, the courthouse. Her sacrifice here would buy time for law enforcement to respond, to stop the larger attack. 3 seconds. She thought about all the children who would grow up safe because of what she was doing right now. 2 seconds. Never forget who I am, she whispered one last time. 1 second. The explosion shattered the morning quiet with a roar that could be heard for miles. The blast blew out every window in the children's section, brought down part of the roof, and sent smoke billowing across the parking lot where the evacuated families huddled together in shock. But Sarah's sacrifice had worked. The heavy table and her body had directed most of the blast's energy downward and inward, instead of the devastating shrapnel cloud that would have killed everyone within 100 yards. The explosion had been largely contained within the building itself. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance as first responders raced toward the library. In FBI offices 12 miles away, agents were receiving frantic radio calls warning them of an imminent attack. At elementary schools and courthouses throughout the region, security teams were implementing lockdown procedures based on intelligence recovered from the captured operatives' phones. Mrs. Williams clutched little Tommy as they watched smoke pour from the building where they had been reading about brave knights just minutes before. She didn't fully understand what had happened, but she knew that Sarah Chun had saved all their lives. "Where's Miss Sarah?" Tommy asked, looking around for the librarian who had turned their evacuation into a game. Mrs. Williams hugged him tighter, tears streaming down her face. "She's being a brave knight, sweetheart, just like in the story." But inside the smoking ruins of the library, something remarkable was happening. The heavy oak table had indeed absorbed and redirected most of the blast, and Sarah Chun, former Navy SEAL, had survived what should have been certain death. Badly injured, barely conscious but alive. And she still had work to do. Sarah regained consciousness to the sound of approaching sirens and the acrid taste of smoke and dust in her mouth. Her body felt like she had been hit by a freight train, which wasn't far from the truth. The heavy oak table that had saved her life now pinned her legs, and she could feel warm blood trickling down her forehead. But she was alive, and more importantly, her mind was clear. Through the ringing in her ears, she could make out voices from the parking lot. Families calling to each other, confirming everyone was safe. Mrs. Williams organizing a head count with the efficiency of a seasoned educator. The beautiful chaos of people who had survived when they should have died. Sarah tried to push the table off her legs, but the explosion had shifted its weight and jammed it against fallen ceiling beams. She was trapped, but not helplessly. Years of escape and evasion training had prepared her for situations exactly like this. She felt around her immediate area, her fingers finding the radio she had taken for one of the captured operatives. The device had survived the blast, protected by her body and the table. Static crackled as she turned up the volume, immediately hearing urgent communications in accented English. Library team not responding. Proceed with Phase 2 on schedule. FBI target confirmed. Security reduced as planned. Moving in now. School team in position. Awaiting your signal. Sarah's blood ran cold despite her injuries. The library attack had been successful in one crucial way. It was drawing emergency responders away from the real targets. She could hear sirens converging on her location while the other terrorist cells prepared to strike facilities that would now have reduced security. She keyed the radio, deepening her voice and speaking with a slight accent. Library objective complete. Proceed to secondary targets. Confirmed. Well done, Ivan. The radio chatter increased as the other teams acknowledged the order and began their final approach sequences. Sarah had bought herself time, but not much. Once they realized the signal hadn't come from their missing colleague, they would become suspicious. She needed to get out of this debris and coordinate a response, but her legs were still trapped. Sarah examined the table more carefully, looking for leverage points. The blast had wedged it at an angle that made direct lifting impossible, but there was a gap near the bottom where she might be able to create space. Using a piece of broken rebar from the ceiling, Sarah began working to pry up one corner of the table. Each movement sent waves of pain through her body, but Lieutenant Chun had endured worse during SEER training. Pain was just information, and right now, the information was telling her she was still functional. After several minutes of careful work, she managed to shift the table enough to free her left leg. Her right leg was still pinned, but she could feel her toes, which meant no spinal damage. Probably a fracture, but nothing that would stop her from moving. The sound of boots crunching through debris made her freeze. Someone was entering the building, moving carefully through the wreckage. Sarah gripped the pistol she had managed to keep during the explosion, listening to determine if the newcomer was friend or foe. Federal agent. Anyone in here? The voice was American, authoritative, and very welcome. Here, Sarah called out. In the children's section. I'm armed but friendly. Agent Marcus Webb of the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force picked his way through the rubble, his weapon drawn, but not threatening. He had been part of the response team that received Sarah's emergency message, arriving just as the explosion occurred. Ma'am, we need to get you medical attention, he said, assessing her situation. Can you move? Not yet. Listen carefully. The attack on the library was a diversion. They have teams moving on the FBI field office, probably Roosevelt Elementary, and the federal courthouse. The radio in my hand has their frequency. Agent Webb's eyes widened as he processed the intelligence. How do you know this? Because I captured 2 of their operatives before the explosion. They're zip-tied in the bathroom hallway if they survive the blast. The radio chatter confirms coordinated attacks on multiple soft targets. Time to occur while first responders are here. Webb immediately activated his own radio. Control, this is Webb on scene at the library. We have actionable intelligence on imminent attacks at federal facilities. I need immediate lockdown protocols initiated at the field office, Roosevelt Elementary, and the downtown courthouse. While Webb coordinated the emergency response, Sarah continued monitoring the terrorist radio frequency. The chatter was becoming more urgent as the other teams approached their targets. They were professional enough to maintain radio discipline, but she could read between the lines of their coded communications. Agent Webb, she interrupted. The school team just confirmed they're in position. They're about to move on children. Webb's face went pale. Roosevelt Elementary housed nearly 600 students in grades K-6. An attack during school hours would be devastating beyond comprehension. Control, priority override on Roosevelt Elementary. We need immediate evacuation and tactical response. Confirmed hostile intent with children as primary targets. Sarah managed to work her right leg partially free, though the pain suggested significant damage. Help me get this table off completely. I need to be mobile. Ma'am, you need medical attention. Let's handle this. Agent Webb, with all due respect, I know these operatives' tactics better than your response teams. I've been inside their planning. And she paused, meeting his eyes directly. I'm former Navy SEAL Team 6, Lieutenant Sarah Chun. My knowledge could save hundreds of lives. Webb stared at her for a moment, processing this information. The small-town librarian trapped under debris was actually one of the most elite special operations soldiers in the world. What do you need? He asked simply. Together, they managed to lift the table enough for Sarah to extract her injured leg. The pain was extraordinary, but she could put weight on it. Webb offered her his arm for support as they made their way toward the exit. The school team will approach from the main entrance to cause maximum psychological impact, Sarah explained as they moved. But they'll have backup positioned at emergency exits to prevent evacuation. Standard terrorist protocol for maximum casualties. How do we counter that? We don't give them the battle they're expecting. Instead of a frontal assault that could result in hostages, we evacuate the school from unexpected directions while taking out their perimeter teams first. They reached the parking lot where emergency vehicles were setting up a command post. Fire trucks, ambulances, police cars, And now FBI tactical units were arriving in a carefully controlled chaos of flashing lights and radio chatter. Sarah spotted the incident commander, a seasoned FBI tactical leader named Captain Torres, who was coordinating the multi-site response. She limped over to his command vehicle, still supported by Agent Webb. "Captain Torres, I have critical intelligence on the Roosevelt Elementary attack," she said without preamble. Torres looked skeptical until Webb explained who she was. The captain's demeanor changed immediately when he learned he was speaking to a former SEAL Team 6 operator. "What do you know?" he asked. "They'll have a minimum of 4 operatives. 2 at the main entrance to draw attention, 1 each at the primary emergency exits on the east and west sides. Their goal is to trap children inside, while emergency responders focus on the obvious threat." Sarah moved to the tactical display showing the school's layout. Despite her injuries, her mind was working with crystalline clarity. "Here's what we do. Your SWAT teams approach from the north side, where they won't expect resistance. Take out the perimeter teams silently before they know we're there. Meanwhile, we evacuate children through the administrative offices on the south side, which they probably haven't covered because it requires going through the principal's office." "That could work," Torres nodded. "But we need someone who knows the building layout and can coordinate with school personnel without causing panic." "I'll do it," Sarah said immediately. "Ma'am, you're injured and need medical attention." "Captain, those children don't have time for me to get medical attention. I've led evacuation operations under fire before. This is what I do." Torres studied her face, seeing the absolute determination there. "Agent Webb, get her whatever support she needs. Lieutenant Shun, you'll coordinate evacuation while my teams neutralize the external threats." As they prepared to move to Roosevelt Elementary, Sarah's radio crackled with a transmission that made everyone freeze. "School perimeter secure. Beginning entry phase now." The attack on 600 children had begun, and Sarah Chun was their best hope for survival. Injured, outnumbered, and working with unfamiliar teams, she was about to face the most challenging mission of her career. But as she climbed into the FBI tactical vehicle, ignoring the pain shooting through her leg, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in 5 years. She was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Lieutenant Chun was going back to war, and this time she was fighting for the most precious targets of all. The FBI tactical vehicle raced through Millbrook's quiet streets toward Roosevelt Elementary, Sarah monitoring radio chatter from both law enforcement and the terrorist teams. The intelligence picture was becoming clearer and more terrifying by the minute. The coordinated attack involved at least 12 operatives across 4 target locations, all timed to overwhelm local emergency response capabilities. "School team reports resistance at main entrance," crackled over the terrorist frequency. "Proceeding with contingency plan." Sarah's blood chilled. Contingency plan meant they had encountered unexpected security and were escalating to more violent tactics. The window for a clean evacuation was closing rapidly. "Captain Torres," she said into her borrowed headset, "they're meeting resistance at the main entrance, which means they're about to switch from stealth to active assault. We have maybe 3 minutes before they start shooting." The school came into view, a sprawling brick building that housed Roosevelt Elementary's 600 students in 2 wings connected by a central administrative building. Sarah could see tactical teams positioning around the perimeter while maintaining distance to avoid triggering a hostage situation. "Lieutenant Shun, what's your assessment?" Torres asked as their vehicle pulled up to the command post being established in the school's parking lot. Sarah studied the building through binoculars, her SEAL training automatically cataloging entrances, sight lines, and tactical considerations. 2 hostile vehicles in the visitor parking area, positioned to control the main entrance. "I can see movement in the east emergency exit area, at least 1 operative with what looks like an automatic weapon." She shifted her view to the administrative wing. "The south side looks clear, but that could change once we start moving children. We need to assume they have overwatch positions we can't see." Principal Margaret Foster, a composed woman in her 50s, was brought to the command post. Her face was pale, but determined as Sarah quickly explained the situation. "Mrs. Foster, I need you to trust me completely. We're going to evacuate your students, but it has to be done in a very specific way. Can you communicate with your teachers without using the regular intercom system? Yes, we have a silent alert system for lockdown situations. Each classroom has a direct phone line to my office. Perfect. Here's what we're going to do. Sarah laid out the evacuation plan with military precision. Teachers would move their students in small groups through interior hallways to the administrative wing, avoiding windows and maintaining absolute quiet. The first priority would be the youngest children, kindergarten through second grade, who would be most vulnerable if the situation escalated. Agent Webb will accompany you to coordinate with teachers. I need you to tell them this is a drill, but a very serious one. No questions, no delays, just follow instructions exactly. As Principal Foster and Agent Webb entered the building through the secured administrative entrance, Sarah repositioned herself to coordinate with the tactical teams. Despite her injured leg, she moved with the fluid efficiency of someone who had conducted similar operations dozens of times. Overwatch 1. This is Command. Torres spoke into his radio. Do you have eyes on the east exit hostile? Affirmative. Single male, AK-47 variant, positioned behind the dumpster area. He's got clear fields of fire on both the east exit and the playground. Sarah keyed into the channel. Overwatch 1. This is Chun. When you take your shot, can you do it silently? Negative. Distance and position requires standard rifle shot. Then, we coordinate the takedown with the evacuation timing. The moment you engage, they'll know we're here, and the other teams will escalate immediately. Through her earpiece, Sarah could hear Principal Foster's calm voice on the school's internal communication system, directing teachers to begin this special drill. The professionalism of the educators was remarkable. Within minutes, the first groups of kindergartners were moving silently through the hallways, guided by their teachers like a carefully choreographed dance. First group approaching admin wing, Agent Webb reported. 26 children, ages 5 to 6, ready for external movement. Sarah watched through binoculars as the side door of the administrative wing opened. Mrs. Patterson, the kindergarten teacher, led her students out in a perfect single-file line, each child holding the hand of the one behind them. They moved across the open ground toward the designated safe zone with the quiet discipline that only very young children could achieve when they sensed real danger. Beautiful, Sarah murmured. Second group ready? Affirmative. First grade, 31 students. The evacuation continued with clockwork precision for 12 minutes. Group after group of children emerged from the building and were guided to safety by waiting social workers and counselors. Sarah maintained constant communication with the tactical teams while monitoring terrorist radio chatter. Then, everything changed. Command, we have movement at the main entrance, reported Overwatch 2. 2 hostiles are approaching the building entrance with what appears to be explosive devices. Sarah grabbed her binoculars and focused on the main entrance. 2 men were moving toward the school's front doors, each carrying large backpacks and assault rifles. Their body language indicated they were no longer concerned with stealth. They're going for maximum casualties, Sarah realized. They're going to breach the main entrance with explosives and start shooting anyone they find. Fourth grade still evacuating, Agent Webb reported. We need more time. Sarah made a tactical decision that went against every doctrine she had learned. Instead of waiting for the coordinated takedown, she was going to create a distraction that would draw the terrorists away from the children. Captain Torres, I'm going to approach the main entrance and draw their attention. Once I engage, your teams take out the perimeter positions and complete the evacuation. Negative, Lieutenant. You're injured, and we don't know how many hostiles we're dealing with. Sir, with respect, those men are about to enter a building with 200 children still inside. I'm not waiting for a perfect tactical solution when a good enough one will save lives right now. Before Torres could respond, Sarah was moving toward the school building, using parked cars and landscaping for cover. Her injured leg protested every step, but Lieutenant Chun had learned long ago to ignore pain when lives were at stake. She positioned herself behind a concrete planter about 50 yards from the main entrance, where she could see both approaching terrorists. They were focused on the building entrance, preparing their explosive charges, completely unaware that a former Navy SEAL was stalking them. Sarah keyed her radio one last time. All teams, I'm engaging in 30 seconds. Take your shots when you have them. She rose from cover with her pistol in a perfect combat stance, the same stance that had served her through countless firefights in Syria, Afghanistan, and other places that didn't officially exist. Federal agent, drop your weapons. Both men spun toward her voice, their training evident in the speed of their response. But Sarah had the advantage of surprise and superior positioning. Her first shots took down the lead terrorist before he could bring his rifle to bear. The second man managed to get off a burst of automatic fire that shattered the concrete planter behind her, but Sarah had already moved, rolling to new cover while maintaining her sight picture. Her next two shots ended the threat permanently. Targets down at main entrance, she reported calmly, as if she had just completed a routine training exercise. Around the perimeter of the school, the FBI tactical teams engaged the remaining operatives with professional efficiency. The east exit terrorist was neutralized by a single sniper shot. The west exit position was cleared by a two-man team that had approached undetected through the maintenance area. All exterior threats neutralized, Captain Torres reported. Building is secure for final evacuation. Sarah limped back toward the command post as the last groups of children emerged from the building. Fourth and fifth graders who had maintained perfect discipline during the entire evacuation, their teachers guiding them with calm authority that had probably saved dozens of lives. Principal Foster appeared at the administrative entrance, her composure finally cracking as she realized what had almost happened to her students. "Are they all safe?" she asked. "Every single one," Sarah replied, accepting medical attention for the first time since the library explosion. 600 children, safe and unharmed. As paramedics worked on her injuries, Sarah continued monitoring the radio frequencies. The attacks on the FBI field office and federal courthouse had been thwarted by the advance warning her intelligence had provided. Across the region, law enforcement agencies were rolling up terror cells and preventing what would have been the deadliest domestic terror attack since September 11th. Lieutenant Shun, Captain Torres approached as medics loaded her into an ambulance. "What you did today, the library, the evacuation, everything, it saved hundreds of lives." Sarah looked toward the safe zone where children were being reunited with their families. Parents crying with relief, teachers maintaining their professional calm despite their own trauma, and children who would grow up never knowing how close they had come to unimaginable horror. "I was just doing my job," she replied. "No," Torres shook his head. "You were being exactly who you've always been. A warrior who protects those who can't protect themselves." As the ambulance pulled away from Roosevelt Elementary, Sarah could see Mrs. Williams in the crowd, holding little Tommy's hand while he looked around for the librarian who had saved his life. She smiled and gave him a small wave, knowing that he would probably never understand that his favorite storyteller had turned out to be the bravest knight of all. 6 months later, Sarah Chun returned to work at the Millbrook Public Library. The building had been rebuilt with a small memorial plaque that simply read, "In honor of those who serve and protect." Most visitors assumed it was a generic tribute to first responders. Sarah knew better. Every day, as she checked out books and helped children find their favorite stories, she carried the knowledge that sometimes the most ordinary-looking heroes are the most extraordinary of all. And if danger ever threatened her community again, Lieutenant Sarah Chun would be ready. Because warriors never really retire. They just change their uniforms. "Never forget who I am," she whispered sometimes, arranging books on the shelf, and the phrase no longer carried the weight of loss and regret. Now it carried the weight of purpose, pride, and the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged.